and we're here today to discuss Crew-12's mission to the International Space Station. Joining us today to discuss Crew-12's flight are leaders from NASA, SpaceX, and ESA. Joining us today virtually is Ken Bowersox, the Associate Administrator for NASA's Space Operations Mission Directorate. Here in the room, we have Steve Stitch, Manager of NASA's Commercial Crew Program at NASA's Kennedy Space Center, as well as Dina Cantella, Deputy Manager for the International Space Station Program. We have Andy Mogensen also joining us virtually. He is the Human Exploration Group Lead for ESA. And we also have Lee Eckert, Senior Mission Manager for Human Spaceflight Mission Management at SpaceX. We'll start with some brief opening remarks from our briefers before jumping into questions and answers here in the room, as well as on our phone bridge and using social media. So without further ado, I am going to toss it over to Ken for his opening remarks.
Hey, good morning. It's great to be here with all of you today and with these great representatives from our NASA programs, SpaceX, and the European Space Agency. We really appreciate your interest in Crew-12 and the work that we do to advance human exploration, both in low Earth orbit and soon to be around the moon. You know, for 25 years, we've been operating in low Earth orbit with humans on board the International Space Station. That's made a great contribution to our country's exploration program. We've learned so much during those 25 years, and we have quite a few years ahead of us to gather in data, preparing to someday go beyond the moon and onto Mars. It's exciting for me to look at the Artemis II crew and their complement and to see how much experience on that particular crew was developed aboard the International Space Station with Reed, Christina, and Victor, and then, of course, Jeremy, who has spent a lot of time working on ISS missions as well on the ground side. All these missions are vital to our operations. As we prepared for the upcoming Artemis II mission, we could see that Crew-12 and Artemis II were going to be occurring close to the same time. And so our teams have worked very carefully to see how we can keep moving towards launch for both missions, while at the same time making sure we avoid any major conflicts and keep the team focused so that we'll be ready to launch Crew-12 at the earliest opportunity after Artemis II either launches or moves to a later launch window. You know, it's really impressive to see how much work has to go into a mission as complicated as Artemis II. And we wanted to make sure that with Crew-12, as important as it is for us to get a crew back to the space station, we wanted to make sure that we gave them every opportunity to launch on this exciting mission for our country. You know, during this season of remembrance, in January or February, if you look back in history, that's when we've lost spaceflight crews in the past. We always think about how we can operate our missions safely. And I just want to reassure you that that's always in the front of our minds as we're working these missions and trying to maximize the capabilities of our crews and maximize our opportunities to launch into space. Trying to deconflict two missions at the same time that we're bringing crews home, as we did on Crew-11, is not easy. Our teams make it look easy sometimes, but I can tell you they work very hard every day, and it's so impressive for me to watch how our commercial partners like SpaceX, our international partners like ESA, Japan, Canada, how we work together to make these missions possible. After this briefing today, you'll get to hear from the crew members themselves. I know they'll be able to tell you a lot of exciting things about their mission, and I'm really excited to see us get back to a full crew complement on the International Space Station and continue the great work that we have going on in low Earth orbit. And with that, I'd like to pass the the podium over to Steve Stitch, our Commercial Crew Program Manager.
Yeah, thanks, Ken, and appreciate all your interest in human spaceflight. It's really great to be here today as we get closer to our Crew-12 mission. You know, it's a pretty exciting time in human spaceflight. For the first time in over 60 years, we have 2 crews in quarantine. So our Crew-12 astronauts went into quarantine on Wednesday, and of course the Artemis crew went into quarantine last week. So I got to see the Crew-12 crew on Tuesday before they went into quarantine. They're in really good spirits. They're ready to go. Jessica and the whole crew are really excited about their mission. In CCP, it's not, it's very obvious to us. These are important weeks of remembrance with the 40th anniversary of Challenger and then the Columbia anniversary coming up this weekend. We always take time to reflect on those losses of life and what we can do to improve and continue to make the vehicles better. Since the Crew-11 return on January 15th, we focused totally on Crew-12. I do want to thank the NASA and SpaceX teams. Remarkable job returning Crew-11. We decided about a week before the return date to bring them home, and well, a remarkable feat to make that happen. For Crew-12, we're ready to launch as early as February 11th. We're keeping all the hardware and our certification processes on track for that. For February 11th launch, it would be a launch at 6 Eastern on the 11th, and then docking would be the next day at about 2 p.m. Eastern in the afternoon. As Ken said, we work in hand with the Artemis team, in contact with Lori every single day as they work through their wet dress operations and proceed toward launch. We have a good plan laid out for how to deconflict those operations all the way through launch, and so I'm really confident that we'll have a good plan to execute those flights safely. Let's see, we continue to improve the vehicles and continue to make changes. Lee will talk more about this. We'll have a new launch and entry suit, an R2 suit on this flight that the crew is trained in and worked in. And we'll also have some Dragon structural upgrades that Lee will talk more about relative to around the parachute door. We beefed up some of that structure. Of course, Crew-12 will fly on Dragon Freedom. This will be the 5th flight. Last flight was Crew-9. And then the hardware is in great shape. On Falcon 9, all that hardware is also at the Cape and ready to be assembled for flight. We'll have an upgrade on the Falcon 9 second stage on the flight computer and avionics system for this flight. First time flying on Crew, but SpaceX has been flying that for some time. To support a 211 launch, we'll go through a series of flight readiness reviews next week, a SpaceX review on Monday and a commercial crew program review on Tuesday, and leading to an agency FR toward the end of the week if we stay on 211. And then we'll have to roll to the pad around the weekend, around Saturday the 7th. That'll give us time to complete the dry dress and static fire operations. We've moved those dry dress and static fire a little bit. We've separated those. If you remember on Crew-9 at pad 40, we had the plume from the static fire come back over Dragon, and we've separated those operations. So we're excited to be here, excited for Artemis. I got to work exploration before coming to commercial crew about a decade ago, and so I'm really excited for them, and I'll turn it over to Dina.
All right, thank you, Steve. And thank you all for being here today. And again, we all do really appreciate your interest in Crew-12. Yesterday we had our ISS program internal readiness review, and we're not tracking any major issues, so we're looking forward to getting the Crew-12 guys on board. You know, Steve mentioned the launch at 6 a.m. On the 11th. If it happens then, again, it will be a docking to our Zenith port on Node 2 at around 2 p.m. or so Eastern time on the following day, the 12th. So the crew, we're excited to welcome back 2 veterans. We've got Jessica Meir. This will be her 2nd space flight. She was on Expedition 6162. And also we have Andrei Fedayev, and he also flew on 6869. This is his 2nd space flight. And our 2 new flyers, we're excited to have Jack Hathaway, the NASA astronaut, as well as Sophie Adeno, and an ESA astronaut. So, of course, we'll welcome them. They're really, all 4 of them are outstanding individuals. They're going to be a great asset to us on board. So on board currently, we have 3 crew with the early departure of Crew-11. And so that's Chris and Sergey. Chris is the only U.S. operating segment crew member right now. This is not our first time at all that we've had one single U.S. crew member on board, and the last time was 2020, but we've had this several times. So what it means is really there's just fewer hands on board to do some of the work. So we are continuing to do research, and we're doing maintenance, and we're doing stowage. We have 2 cargo vehicles on board. And so there's a lot of work to be done. And so, that's one of the reasons we like to have more than 3 crew on board, is just to get more work done. That, and then on the U.S. operating segment, if we were to have a major failure, then we would like to have a second USOS crew member to be able to go out and perform a complex spacewalk. It just has to do with the amount of specialty training that they've had. And so right now, no issues on board ISS, like I said. And, we are, when the Crew-12 guys get there, bring us up to our full complement to be able to react to those types of contingencies faster. But we're not tracking anything urgent at the time. So everything is really actually going very well with, I did talk to Chris on Wednesday, and he's in great spirits, and as well as the Crew-12 guys coming up. So everybody is looking forward to joining up on ISS very soon. So sometimes, as you know, we would have 2 Dragon crews that would hand over the intricate details on board ISS. They'd both be there at the same time, so we'd have up to 11 crew on board. In this case, we'll not be having that direct handover, is what we call it. But we have Chris on board, and he knows all those intricacies. So between that and some videos that the crews have recorded in advance, we don't see any issues. We're not tracking any problems whatsoever with not having that direct handover. So we don't see any problem with this indirect handover. From a science perspective, this crew is going to be given a lot of science, the Crew-12 guys, along with Chris. And so I'll just highlight some of our experiments that they'll have while they're on board. One of them is an IV fluid experiment. And so, medically, an IV bag, you've seen them all. They're, of course, a medical grade type of fluid. And so when we go on a Mars mission, an IV fluid bag like that will expire before the entire mission has transpired. And furthermore, if you were to launch a bunch of IV bags in case of some medical contingency, then that takes up mass and volume. So what we're going to do on board during the Crew-12 timeframe is see if we can use potable water from the ISS system and put it through a filtration system that will take out the bacteria and the other contaminants and give us medical grade IV fluid. So we'll bring a bag of IV fluid home, test it out, and see if it meets the mark. So you can imagine that in both for space applications and on the ground that this could be an incredibly useful experiment. So another couple of examples, we have a plant experiment looking at microbe interaction with the plants, and that will help us grow plants in future missions, as well as looking at astronauts' body and microgravity, specifically their blood flow. So we have different types of instrumentation and trying to understand geometries and how that could impact crew members' health long-term in microgravity. So lots of good experiments to be had. And then just our near-term flight plan, I wanted to mention that SpaceX 33 is on board right now. And so Chris, is, like I said, is doing some research and some stowage associated with that mission. That mission also in the external trunk, it has a boost kit, and SpaceX and our team have done a great job developing that kit, and we've been using it over the past several weeks, and we've used up all of the propellant, all the usable propellant in the trunk, and we've boosted ISS to the highest it's ever been. So last week we boosted ISS to 262 miles. And that's 422 kilometers, so that's the highest we've ever had ISS historically. And so I just want to thank the team and the SpaceX guys for the outstanding delivery and this contribution for ISS. So that mission is going to complete on or about February 26th. So we're looking to undock it at that time. That'll be after the Crew-12 guys get on board and we can get everything wrapped up associated with the stowage there and the science. And we also have got the HTVX vehicle, X1 vehicle on board. I'm super happy to have that. It's the maiden voyage of that particular spacecraft. And we are looking right now for an unbirth date around the first week of March. And we have a small navigation sensor demonstration as well associated with that. So we'll unbirth it in March, and then, sometime in early March, we'll take the robotic arm and maneuver the HTV so that its sensors have a line of sight to the front docking port, allow it to just do a quick test, and then we'll release it the following day. And additionally, so in March, currently planning for March 22nd, we have the next Progress launch. So a couple of days prior to that launch, we'll undock the existing Progress that's on board that same port on the Zenith side. And of course, as you're aware, the Russian launch pad for Soyuz and Progress out at Baikonur, it's under repairs right now. So we'll be watching that schedule, and any questions you have about that, of course, I'll have to direct you to Roscosmos on that. But it's looking pretty good in that time frame for that vehicle to arrive. So we're looking forward to that. Our partnership is very strong, and so when they have a small delay in their cargo vehicle, of course, we've been assisting with some amount of cargo, but it has not been a big tax or any big problem on our side at all whatsoever. And then lastly, I'll just mention the 2 EVAs that we were going to have in January, but were deferred due to the Crew-11 departure. They're not urgent, and we're looking for a home. We'll let you guys know where those will fall, but we're looking at the spring, summer timeframe, and we have not yet determined which dates. So I lastly just want to thank all the ISS program people, but also our military and our other government agencies, the commercial crew program, the flight operations guys, the engineering team, and the list goes on, but everyone that has assisted with bringing Crew-11 home and trying to prepare for this Crew-12 mission. We're looking really good. Excited to get the Crew-12 guys here. And that's all I have, so I'm going to hand it over to Andy.
Well, thank you, Dina. It's a pleasure to be part of the briefing today, even if it's only remotely from the European Astronaut Center. And I hope you can hear me all right. NASA is and has always been one of the closest partners of the European Space Agency. And a couple months ago, we celebrated together 25 years of continuous human presence on board the International Space Station. It's an impressive milestone and a testimony of the successful collaboration which has been tying our space agencies together. Now we have ESA astronaut Sophie Adano as part of Crew-12, about to embark on her first journey to space. She will be the 22nd ESA astronaut working on the ISS and conducting research and advancing science, notably thanks to our European Columbus module, which is our European laboratory, and which recently completed its 100,000th orbit around the Earth. I think that was last September, if we calculated correctly. Sophie was selected in 2022. It was the first time that ESA selected a new class of astronauts since 2008. It was a European-wide astronaut selection, and it attracted more than 22,500 candidates. And out of those, we selected 5 talented individuals to join our astronaut corps. And Sophie will be the first from this new class to embark on a long-duration mission. Together with 4 other members of her class and a colleague from the Australian Space Agency, she went through basic training at the European Astronaut Center and was assigned to a mission less than 1 month later. Teams have since then worked tirelessly to ensure the preparation of this mission and support to Sophie on her upcoming adventure. And I'd like to thank all of those teams for preparing Sophie so well. Astronauts' missions, operations, and training are at the heart of any exploration program, and they rely on a multitude of passionate people devoting their time and energy to ensure the success of our missions. Sophie is one of those talented individuals and has been performing incredibly well, and we're all very sure that she will have a tremendously successful mission on the ISS together with her crewmates. You might also have noticed that in addition to the Crew-12 and Expedition 74 patches, Sophie will also be carrying an ESA patch on her mission. This is a tradition among ESA astronauts to name and have an ESA mission patch. And Sophie has chosen a name for her mission, which she thinks reflects the mission. The name is Epsilon, meaning or symbolizing the power of the small yet impactful contributions, and also symbolizing how multiple parts unite to create a whole. And I think this is a very nice message that underlies how an astronaut is a part of a much larger and wider group, or in other words, a small piece of a larger and more complex puzzle. From the support teams to the engineers working on the launcher and the technologies, from the scientific community supporting the development and implementation of advanced experiments, and to the countless institutions involved in one way or the other, it takes thousands of people to support this collective endeavor. We all know it. Space exploration activities are developing worldwide at a pace unparalleled, with ambitious initiatives put in place by a high number of countries and private actors. In such a context, a coherent and well-coordinated strategy is essential, and Europe is proud to have developed a substantial human spaceflight program as well. With a bold vision of establishing continuous, sustainable, and responsible human and robotic exploration of the solar system by providing unique contributions and returning benefits to society lies at the core of this overarching strategy. And our high-level destination goals are to maintain a human presence in and utilization of low Earth orbit, to allow Europeans to explore the moon in the 2030s, and to prepare to take Europeans to explore Mars at the end of the 2040s. With that, we're also ensuring our long-term participation in key programs such as the International Space Station and Artemis, as well as ensuring our common ability to act towards any future projects involving human spaceflight. And thus, everyone at ESA is very proud and excited to support not just Sophie, but all of Crew-12 and Expedition 74. And we look forward to an exciting future within human spaceflight, not only in low Earth orbit, but also in the coming years to the moon. And with that, I'd like to pass it over to Lee.
Hi, thank you, Andy. Hello, everyone. Excited to be here and get to talk to you about our preparations for the launch of Dragon and the Crew-12 mission in 2 weeks. It's been a busy month with Crew-11 Dragon departure and safe return a couple weeks ago. Crew-11 safely splashed down off the coast of San Diego, California, which was our 5th Dragon return since moving back to the West Coast last year. And then last week, the Sirius-33 Dragon, currently docked to the ISS, completed our final boost burn, helping maintain ISS orbital altitude over the last 5 months. In parallel, our teams have been working towards Crew-12 launch, which will be our 12th long-duration human spaceflight mission to the ISS, supporting NASA's Commercial Crew program. We're excited to fly Jessica, Jack, Sophie, and Andre, along with Critical Science, to the ISS, and I'm particularly excited about our return frequent flyer Andre for his 2nd Dragon mission, and to be a part of Jack and Sophie's first spaceflight as well. Our teams are currently finishing up closeout of the Dragon spacecraft, with expectation to transport to the hangar at Pad 40 early next week. And the Falcon 9 booster that's supporting this mission will be on its second flight after completing a successful launch of a Starlink mission earlier this month. And then Crew-12 will be launching off of Space Launch Complex 40. This will be our second human spaceflight launch off of that pad. And first for this mission, the Falcon booster will perform a return to launch site to our new landing zone at Slick 40. As Steve mentioned, we're working towards a no later than February 11th, 6 a.m. as our first launch opportunity, and all of our hardware and pad systems are on track to support. As always, NASA and SpaceX work closely together in partnership to make sure our teams and hardware are ready to fly. This mission includes a few notable upgrades, including a new Falcon 9 Stage 2 flight controller, an upgraded Dragon parachute bay and closeout structure, and the full crew will don upgraded flight suits, similar to the version that Crew-11 pilot Mike Fink wore for his mission. We still have multiple reviews and final checkouts prior to launch. This gives us an opportunity to step back, double and triple check all of our data, and make sure that we're safe to fly. Crew safety is always our joint highest priority. We're very proud of our partnership with ISS and the international community that helps sustain, operate, and execute incredible science on the ISS. And I want to say a special thank you to our friends at NASA, ESA, Roscosmos, and the 45th for your continued trust as we proceed towards another crew mission together. And go Crew-12.
Mm-hmm. Great. Thank you to our briefers for those opening remarks. We will now open it up for questions here in the room as well as on the phone bridge. If you are on the phone bridge, you can press *1 to submit your question. And if your question has already been asked and answered, please press *2 to withdraw it. We do have quite a bit of media interest today, so please try to limit your question to one each. Once your name is called, please state your name, affiliation, and to whom you'd like to direct your question. It looks like we do have a question here. Go ahead, Eric.
Eric Berger, Ars Technica. Thanks for doing this. I guess my question concerns the turnaround time between Artemis 2 and Crew-12. Like, what's the minimum amount of time you need to transition from one launch to the other? And specifically, I understand that, you know, one of the issues is repositioning Navy recovery forces in case of an ascent abort. So maybe just talk about sort of that scenario and explain to us kind of the timing.
Yeah, I can start and see if Ken or Dina have anything to add. So, the timing in between missions sort of depends a little bit as to what happens. For example, if Artemis were to launch, have a great wet dress, proceed into their FRR and launch on the 8th, we think we could be ready to go launch Crew-11 around the 13th. So, and the things that we have to...
If they launch the 19th.
Oh, I'm saying if they launch successfully, yeah. If they launch or in an orbit, then we would defer all the way to the 19th, right? We would then stand down, let them have their operations. If they get into a countdown and they attempt on the 8th and then have an issue where they stand down, then we could go a few days later as early as the 13th. And so the things that we're looking to deconflict are operations relative to the suit-up room. Right now, we tend to use the dual suit-up room in the ONC where the crew stays. And then we have an option to go use the SpaceX suit-up room if we need to at Pad 39A. SpaceX has been gracious enough to let us use that, which they've used for many of their flights. The rescue assets are common between the two missions, so that's something that Detachment 3 and the Department of Defense Forces, right, the Air Force, we use common forces for that. Recovery is separate, right? We have a Navy ship that Artemis uses for recovery. We use the SpaceX recovery. It's a common landing site off San Diego, and then the northern sites for Artemis are kind of overlap our northern sites. So that's why we would deconflict operations in flight. And then, we have different scenarios. If they get into a wet dress and they need another wet dress, but then didn't proceed in this window, we could go on as early as the 11th or 12th. So we have all these different scenarios just depending on what happens. Hopefully that answers your question.
Thank you. And we do have another question here in the room. Go ahead. Okay, Mark, go ahead.
Thank you, Mark Carreau, the Aviation Week and Space Technology. And I apologize if you said this during your opening remarks, but how long is the Crew-12 mission planned for, and how flexible would it be in terms of maybe extending it with the crew you're launching?
Yeah, we have the capability. We did extend the certification of Dragon. You know, we've been flying 6-month missions, and we have extended the certification of Dragon to be able to stay docked to ISS up to 8 months. And so we have that capability. We'd have to go look at whether we're going to use it or not, but it's there and ready to stay up to eight months. Eventually, we're working on extending that certification longer and longer. As we get toward the end of ISS and move toward the deorbit of ISS, we may need to stay a little longer. And so we keep extending that certification.
And so in this case, we are planning on an 8-month mission. And so, but, we're continually looking at what our overall flight plan looks like.
Thank you both. We'll next take a question from Marcia Dunn with the Associated Press.
Oh, hi, Marcia Dunn at the AP. Are the communication assets also a driver for wanting the two separate, the two Artemis II Crew-12 separate for launch time communication assets? And for Dina, were there any extra medical tests or checks ordered for Crew-12 given the circumstances surrounding Crew-11's early departure? Any changes whatsoever stemming from the sick crew? And is the IV fluid experiment related to that, or was that already planned? Thanks.
Yeah, I'll take the first question relative to the communication assets. Yes, Artemis does utilize the TDRS communication assets for not only on pad operations, but also with Orion, but also early part of their mission, they fly a high Earth orbit, and so they use TDRS for that, and so that would have to be deconflicted. Also, if we were in free flight, and which we're not intending to do, if we had simultaneous operations between Dragon in flight and Artemis, we would have to deconflict even the Deep Space Network comm to make sure the two beams, the TDRS beam and the Deep Space Network beam, didn't overlap. So that was one of the considerations as well. And I'll let Dina take the next question.
Okay, and then on the Crew-12 pre-flight medical testing question, I'm not aware of any tests that were changed or new. I mean, of course, like any normal human being and person, you'll have your doctor consultations and such, but I'm not aware of any specific tests. And then on the IV fluid experiment, it's not related. This is the experiment that was planned before the Crew-11 return. This is just happened to be a fun experiment that I just wanted to point out, but it is not at all related.
Thank you. Next up, we'll go to Will Robinson-Smith with Spaceflight Now.
Hi, thanks for taking the time to answer our questions today. Wonder if you could expand a little bit more. This is going towards Mr. Eckert from SpaceX. A little bit more on the upgraded flight suits that the crew will be flying. What did you learn from the test out with Mike Fink on that initial flight with Crew-11? Thanks.
Yeah, thank you for your question. Yeah, I think we're constantly learning and trying to improve our hardware to make it as reliable and safe as possible. We did have a few lessons learned from the version that Mike Fink flew for his Crew-11 mission and applied those with the build and production of the Crew-12 flight suits. But predominantly, it's very similar design as what Mike flew.
Thank you. Our next question on the phone bridge comes from Ryan Caton with NASASpaceRights.com.
Hi, thanks for doing this. I'm just wondering, following the postponement of the EVAs from Crew-11, has there been any extra or kind of specialized training or procedures being provided to Crew-12 to prepare for those? I know you said they were going to be taking place as early as the springtime, so I'm just curious about that. Thank you.
So, the crews do training in our neutral buoyancy laboratory, and of course, knowing that this is happening, ideally you would get as much training as you could on all of those types of tasks. In this case, there was not a lot of time, but they are familiar with those types of tasks, and they are trained fully to do those tasks when they come up. So there was not like a extreme urgency to get them a whole lot of training prior to their flight in order to do those.
Thank you. As a reminder, you can press *1 to submit your question, and we also will try to get to some questions on social media too. So if you want to use the hashtag #AskNASA, you can submit your question on social media as well. Next up, we'll go to Josh Dinner with Space.com.
Hi, thanks for doing this. Josh Dinner with Space.com. In lieu of the crew handover period aboard the space station, were there any activities or operations that needed to be mitigated or altered due to the lack of crew?
So, frankly, when you have 11 crew members on board, it's a lot of crew members. And so you just have a lot less planning to do, a lot fewer number of scheduled events, I'd say. But, Chris and his new Crew-12 crew members will have a lot of time to do that handover. There's actually not a rush like you might have when you have a certain, like, say, 2 or 3 day handover of crew to crew and trying to get all that information across. So there was really not, the main mitigation is, it's a kind of a lot to take in. You're in a new home, and just like if you, for example, you go to some new BRBO or whatever your bed and breakfast is, and you got to push the faucet handle harder in order to make it stop, or this particular area is drafty, and there's a couple of just fine details, and those types of words are passed from crew to crew. And so Chris will do what he can, and also these videos that the crew has recently made have kind of detailed out a lot of really cool intricacies, and so those videos have been passed to the Crew-12 guys, and so they've had a chance to study those in advance. So really there's not like a mitigation needed so much as just we've done everything we can to supplement and bring them up to speed as quickly as possible, and I'm sure they'll hit the ground running.
Thanks, Dina. Next up, we'll go to Jeff Faust with Space News.
Good morning. In addition to having a longer increment potentially for Crew-12, I know there were some discussions last year about reducing the USOS crew size from 4 to 3. Now that you have a better understanding of the budget and station logistics, is that still on the table for missions beyond Crew-12?
Maybe I could take it first, and if Ken, you want to add anything, but I'll just say at this time we're continuing to plan for 4 crew. But we're continually looking at our stockpile of supplies and what it takes to continue to do that. Right now, we are planning for 4. Ken, did you want to add anything?
I would just say that what we do is we look at options that we might have to activate if we have reduced resources. But based on the most recent appropriation and the supplemental appropriation that we received before that, we think we're going to be able to maintain 4 crew on ISS. And we're always evaluating mission length and the activities that we do aboard ISS to make sure that we match with the resources we have available.
Our next question comes from Marcia Smith with Space Policy Online.
Thanks so much. My question, I think, is to Ken. So I'm curious about how many more U.S. flights you're expecting to ISS, because you're extending the length of each mission, and it's already 2026, and 2030 is just around the corner. So how many more flights to ISS do you anticipate? And those will be, I gather, on Crew Dragons. But how is Starliner looking? Are you going to fit in Starliner at some point?
I haven't done the math on the number of flights, but if I do it roughly here, I think it's about 8 to 10 more flights that we'd be looking at. If you slip in private astronaut missions and potential other individual short missions, the numbers could go up or down. Starliner, we're planning to fly on another uncrewed mission this spring. Sometime in the spring to summer. We'll launch it when it's ready. We'll gather all the information we need to complete the certification, and then we want to work Starliner back into the rotation so it could have, right now, we think as many as 3 more missions with crew.
Thank you. We do have a follow-up from Will Robinson-Smith with Spaceflight Now.
Yes, hi. Thanks for taking another round of questions from us here. Just a quick follow-up, because my Starliner question was asked and answered, and I appreciate Marcia for that. A quick one to Mr. Eckert. With the use of landing zone 40, first of all, is that the name of it, LZ40? And is there anything else that needs to be buttoned up at that landing site for this first landing back at 40? Thanks.
Yeah, thank you for the question. It's obviously an exciting time at Spaceport, Florida, and we're excited to debut our new landing zone 40. That's the right name. This will be our primary landing site for our Falcon 9 boosters that perform return to launch site going forward. And we've completed all of the range and Space Force certification to be ready for this mission. We still have access to landing zone 2 if we ever need it, but the expectation is that would be primarily for Falcon Heavy launches where we have 2 return to launch site side boosters.
Thank you. And I believe we do have another question here in the room.
Thank you very much. Good morning. My name is Moises Avila. I work for Agence France Presse, AFP. Considering the medical concern you had to deal with the Crew-11, is there anything you can do to avoid that issue in the Crew-12, or does it just depend on the physical condition of each astronaut, or maybe it was just something unexpected?
I'll just say, so we're not talking about the medical situation on Crew-11. Nothing has changed in our way of doing business. I'll leave it at that, maybe.
And we do have another question on our phone bridge from Marcia Dunn with the Associated Press.
Oh, hi. Yes, Steve, could you run through the dates again versus when you could launch, depending on the scenarios? You said maybe 13th, and then you switched to the 19th. I'm not sure what, I followed what the difference there is in when you could launch either. And is there any way, if Artemis 2 is totally out of the picture, can you move it up before the 11th, or is that the absolute soonest you can go?
Yeah, good question, Marcia. So right now, the 11th is the soonest we could launch. When we laid out all the hardware processing for Dragon, Falcon 9, crew training, and that whole activity of preparing with the certification, the 11th is the earliest that we could launch. So we have no intention of planning to accelerate off the 11th. There's a couple different scenarios with Artemis. The one would be they go to wet dress and they have a successful wet dress and they launch, and they've said right now no earlier than the 8th. If that happens, they would be in free flight and land roughly 10 days later. Then we would move our launch after Artemis to no earlier than the 19th. If Artemis got into a countdown and had some kind of challenge in the countdown and then needed more time, we could go earlier than the 19th. A little later than the 11th, but more like probably the 13th, 14th. So we have, depending on what launch date they launch on, we know as what our earliest launch date would be, and then we also know if they get into a countdown and were to have an issue, how early we can go. And we've laid out all the timelines relative to crew quarantine, when SpaceX will move their hardware to 40, when we get into a static fire dry dress. I would say those timelines will be a little dynamic because, in particular, if we get out to the launch pad and we're trying to static fire around Artemis operations, we will work around Artemis in all those scenarios. So it depends, and we have a table that we have built, that's what I'm reading from, that lay out all those different options. Hopefully that was more clear, Marcia.
Thanks, Steve. We do have another question from someone here in the room.
Richard T. with the Post newspaper. A question for either Steve or Dina. Can you describe what the EVAs that Crew-11 was going to do and have now been pushed forward for Crew-12? And have they been modified in any way with a little bit of extra time, or are they the same in scope? Thank you.
Okay, I think that's a question for me. And so right now we're planning to keep the EVAs the same, but if you recall, and there was a briefing on this in early January, one of them is to install a modification kit in order to put one of the new rollout solar arrays out. And then the other one was, we were calling it the triple jump EVA, where we have some jumpers that we're installing as well, and a camera, some sort of a reflector in that particular one. So those two EVAs would still continue probably intact, although of course we can look at modifications now that we have time. But we also want to do another AVA as well that installs another modification kit, which would be used for a second rollout solar array. And we're looking to fly those solar arrays in August. And so ideally we'll complete all 3 of those EVAs before then. But, of course, we'll look at what the priorities are. And like you said, if there's a modification, it's more of a shuffling of tasks. We don't really have a lot of new tasks coming up other than the one I just mentioned with the modification kit.
Thank you. We'll go to another question here in the room. Eric Berger.
Yeah, hi, Eric Berger with Ars Technica. Just a question on cargo delivery to ISS, specifically regarding Cygnus. Can you maybe update sort of the status of NG-24 after there was the engine issue, minor engine issue on the previous Cygnus flight, and then NG-22 was damaged in transit. I'm just curious kind of what the cadence of those missions, which I think one's on a Falcon 9, one's on the new Antares rocket, just kind of how that slots in with your manifest. Thank you. Okay,
let me first address the engine problem. So we are continuing to look at what basically follow that technical investigation and make sure we flush out everything. We are looking pretty good on that investigation, but are still working with Northrop Grumman on that. The next flight that we have is NG-24, and that's currently on schedule. They've been through thermal vac as well. And that particular mission's launch date is, it looks like, I think it's it's April 3rd. And so we are working through, of course, as we always are, pre-flight items with Northrop Grumman on that one. So again, we're clearing up some of the final discussions on those, but right now the hardware is progressing well. In terms of the cadence, we'll then have another mission after that towards the end of this year. For the NG-22 particular vehicle, we're still working with Northrop on where we're going to slot that particular vehicle in, and as well as the maiden Firefly voyage. So, we don't have as many cargo flights as we used to have, and a lot of that is driven by budget. So we want to very carefully figure out where we would put the maiden voyage of a new rocket, and where we want to put that particular, essentially it's a different sized type vehicle for the container, and where we want to put that in the manifest. And so we're still discussing all of that with Northrop, but we are intending to slot that in, and we're just trying to find the right time for that.
Thank you. We'll go back to the phone bridge for our next question. This question is from Rebecca Helwell.
Hey, yeah, thanks so much. I'm just wondering if you can share a little bit more about how mission controllers are planning to sort of focus on both Artemis and Crew-12 at the same time. How are they preparing to sort of monitor both things?
I can start and then see if Dina or Ken has anything to add. I mean, the flight control teams are separate. If you just think about Artemis has been training for many months to prepare for their mission. Those are a separate set of flight controllers. And the engineering teams are largely separate. The contractor teams that work Orion, the Space Launch System, and the ground systems at KSC are separate. Of course, with Dragon, the flight control team is really a SpaceX team at Hawthorne for Dragon, and then at KSC for the launch. So those are separate. And then, obviously, for the last 25 years or more, we've had an ISS team controlling the space station, and those flight controllers are separate as well.
And maybe I'll just add, some groups are specialists, for example, in comm. We brought up communication as some of the assets that are shared. And so those teams work very closely. They sit next to each other in some cases. And so it's really a very well-coordinated effort when there is any kind of overlap. But like Steve said, for the most part, you've got one team focused on Artemis and one team focused on Crew-12.
Thank you both. Back on the phone bridge, we have David Curley with Full Throttle.
For Lee Eckert, can you get into a little more details about the lessons learned with Think's suit? And could you give us, if there's one bit of comfort that the astronauts would really notice, would it be the joints under pressurization or a different modification? What would somebody who's flown with the previous suit say about the new suit?
Yeah, thank you for the question. I I think we talked about the suit redesign a little bit prior to Crew-11. Primarily, the changes were to make it easier to enter and exit the suit or don and doff the suit, as well as add adjustability to support different personal dimensions. And so that lets us build a smaller set of standard flight suit sizes and then adjust for the individual versus building a custom suit every time. The main goal for us is to eventually build a capability to build hundreds and thousands of flight suits to support a future with multiple planet species. I think for like the individual inside the suit, the feel, pressurized and unpressurized, is largely unchanged from the first version.
Thank you. We do have a follow-up from Marcia Dunn with the Associated Press.
Hi, Steve. I just want to make sure I understand what you're saying. One last clarification. So if Artemis 2 launches first, Crew-12 will not launch until Artemis 2 is safely back on Earth. Is that correct?
It's true, Marcia. That is our plan.
Thank you. Next up, we'll go to Will Robinson-Smith with Spaceflight Now.
And thanks for taking another one. This one's for Dina and Ken, if you'd like to add to it as well. Maybe with the ISS scheduling in reference to Cygnus and other traveling cargo vehicles, the first flight of Dream Chaser obviously is not docking to station, but with the remaining time of ISS on orbit, given a successful flight of Dream Chaser, would there be room in the manifest for it to have a docking mission with the International Space Station? Thank you.
Okay, well, maybe I could start. I'll just say, we are looking forward to a Dream Chaser potential mission in free flight towards the end of this year. Of course, that is not coming to ISS. We'll be watching that very closely, and we do have our contract mechanism open for us to purchase services as we can fit them in, as you mentioned, for later after this particular demonstration with both parties in agreement. And so we would assess at that time whether we could fit it in and by when the vehicles would be ready. And, we're very interested in watching, I'd say. Of course, we could probably fit it in if the turnaround time between that last landing and the next launch gives us that time, but we'll have to assess that later once we kind of understand what their turnaround time will be.
We'll next go to Ryan Caton with NASASpaceRights.com.
Thanks for allowing the follow-up. My question's for Lee. Just looking at the schedule, this launch obviously is going from 40. There hasn't been a launch from 39A for a hot minute, and I'm not seeing anything on the immediate schedule. So I'm just wondering if there's any kind of, obviously there's a lot of Starship construction going on. I'm just wondering if you could provide any information on what's happening with 39A. I don't know if there's like an intentional stand down or something going on. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for your question. It's great to have 2 launch pads off the Florida coast. For our manifest going forward, we're planning to launch most of our Falcon 9 launches off of Space Launch Complex 40. That will include all Dragon missions going forward. And that will allow our CAPE team to focus 39A on Falcon Heavy launches and hopefully our first Starship launches later this year.
Thank you. And we are going to end with a question from social media. Robert Guzman on Facebook wants to know, will NASA allow the crew on space station to watch the Super Bowl, or will they be required to work?
Well, I'll answer that. Absolutely, if they'd like to watch the Super Bowl, we'll give them that chance. We'll have to see how that overlaps and if there's any critical events for ISS, but certainly we could record it and, if necessary, play it back. But I'm sure that if they'd like to see it, that we'll make that happen.
Great, thank you, and thank you to our briefers for answering the questions today, as well as all the media that dialed in, as well as participated here in the room. We will have the opportunity for you to hear directly from Crew-12 here in a little bit. They will be speaking at 12 p.m. Central Time and talking about their mission. So thanks again for joining us. That will wrap up today's briefing.